Istvan Bai, National Coaching Institute, British Columbia, Canada. We are doing a long-term athlete development sport-specific project to develop a comprehensive plan for South African sailing. I'm doing it with 14 sports in South Africa. This is the first wave of sports. The second wave will start when we finish with these 14.
What is the number of sailors in this country?
It's something like 2% of the population. I remember doing this a couple of years ago.
And your barriers to entry are high. Yeah. Because you've got boats that are expensive, equipment that are expensive.
If you're a kid and you're talented at rugby, you know you want to become a Springbok. But take a sailor and it hasn't got a clear path. Our sailors' goals at the moment in South Africa, the biggest goal is Oppie Worlds.
Yes.
And that's at 15 years old maximum. So, in other words, you haven't got a lifetime of sport with a sailor at the moment. You've got just till 15 years old.
Is there a pathway that's defined as to that I am going to move along that pathway and get to elite level? But what I want to find out is that for me it seems like if people who organize or people who identify the talent and make sure that these athletes progress are the ones that individually can provide in terms of money.
But very often the guy who has the talent, who sails the best boat, will win. And that's changing in the Oppie fleet, I think, but there was a time when if you had a carbon fibre boat and you had something else.
The Oppie classes. Except now, if you have an Oppie, you've got the best boat, you've got the most talent. If you don't have a parent with money to take you all over the country to all the different programs, then you won't be in the team to get selected.
It's just what about these 5 kids go to World Championships, and then the next 15 kids go into the All Africans, because that's what. So it's 20 kids that are allowed to go compete overseas every year. And the optimist class, we haven't broken the 100 barrier in the last 7 years.
A lot of us feel that we should get kids in on a lot of different aspects of sailing at a younger age and maybe less focused on competition.
If we had to summarize the strength of the athletes, it would be there's a huge appeal and huge participation up until 16. And weaknesses, we said you lose a lot of sailors after 15. There's lots of pressure on the children, not enough money to pursue.
Some provinces are really struggling just to get any sailors to come in.
So huge talent base and the weakness not developed enough.
I was in Germany when I think I was telling you in Germany, you compare the money spent that we had. We were 20% of the European boats.
In Cape Town, every week you'd have an article related to sailing. Since those is finished, you might have one article every 3 months.
I think that the youth are very often the best teachers, but they don't have organizational and responsibility skills. And so you need to get those older people and not involve them, but make them the senior, and then have the actual coaches beneath that and whatever. Because often I find when things go wrong, it's because someone hasn't thought about the implications of what they might do. You know, there are programs that have succeeded, and we should look at those things and look at what happens around the rest of the world, and then just structure it so that ultimately we all go the same way.
They are identifying the strengths and weaknesses in the South African sailing system and looking at athletes, coaches, officials, parents and facilities. And when we identify the gaps, we know what to find the solutions. So we are looking at where are we now, then we look at where do we want to be, and then how are we going to get there, the policy. It's relatively simple, but they will have a lot of homework when they go away from him here.
Optimum time to learn the fundamental movement skills. So from 6 onwards, they can take instruction, they'll understand instruction. But before that, if you have structured learning, they struggle they can't understand structured learning. They understand learning through play.
The language now is deliberate play and deliberate practice. Jean Coté is advising let them play their own way. And the deliberate practice is when you have structured practice. And most of the time they're over-structured. The young kids' practice are over-structured and they cannot learn it well.
From 6 already, you can start having structured learning taking place.
There's no official training. All is run by volunteers, so there's no sustainability, no continuity. Too few are properly trained. Many administrators or officials focus only on senior sailors, and officials are too old. There's no young people, so again, it's like a generation gap.
There's a huge separation, and people's motivation to sit on committees is very different to people's motivation.
Every weekend the clubs are running races, and there are still officials running them for us.
I think the facilities we have are there.
South Africa has amazing facilities.
So there's too many classes over too many different regions.
We made like a booklet, a PDF document that we send to all the new parents, and it explains all the rules very simply, and it explains the etiquettes and what's expected of them as parents in the club.
Generation gap.
So we can move to officials.
Yeah, problematic.
Parents. Child athlete satisfaction with the parental involvement. These are reactive parents, active parents, and proactive parents. This is the optimal zone here. Those are cooperating, very conscious, and these are the hyperactive parents.
Our dropout rate is about 60%, but we're sitting with kids that are not dropping out.
The schools program that we've launched in Cape Town, it's purely you come down and you sail for 1.5 hours, and you out of the boats are rigged for them, and then when it comes to the race day, it's a 2.5 hour morning thing. The parents come down, they watch it, they're excited, and the day's over.
But a big thing is unstructured programs. The kids get bored. And it's much easier to link schools, clubs, universities.
The fastest growing water sport in the world at the moment.
Is to help clubs to establish a national standard for volunteers, for coaches, for everything else. And I think one thing that we lack in South African sailing is a national voice that addresses club development across the board.
This is the second part of the discussion group. The former one, we identified what are the gaps in the system, so where are we now? The next step is to identify where do we want to be. So how are you getting rid of the gaps and putting up the future plans, and also the next step will be how are we going to get there, what policies we can make in order to implement the where do we want to be discussion.
University sports tend to develop quite quickly because you're continually having to take new people and train them and then let them move on. Whereas club sports, you can have the same people there for 20 years and nothing's happening.
Yeah. Because often they'll start and then they just fizzle out, and they've taken a lot of the finances that a kid could have used that wants to stay through. And there's got to be a commitment by the athlete.
We don't see club sailing anymore on a weekend basis. And what's happening actually with the Hobie guys in the Western Cape, they've kind of not going to point series anymore, but they started in the club sailing again because it's costing them too much to travel. So now they're adapting the club attitude again. And that's, I think, very good for sailing again.
We've done the same thing up here with our Hobie clubs. We've said that let's focus less on regattas and more on getting club sailing going, because that's when they bring their friends to
and then
come
just
sail.
do your
You
one
get more kids
provincial and
coming.
your nationals.
Yeah.
To anyone who races at a high level, the thing that frustrates them most is that there are not enough boats on the start line.
So you would want to have proper coaching structures and coaches that fit those structures.
Some people that are trainers will never be a coach, and a coach sometimes will never be a trainer because they don't have those skills.
At a national level, there've got to be people that assess people's skills, because otherwise, we have always just had a very ad hoc approach in South Africa. But look at the UK; they've won numerous medals and more than one Olympics, and it's purely because the structures are in place.
And putting so much pressure on their kids to compete at such a high level at such a young age, and they push their kids so hard that they eventually give up sailing.
A lot of your commitment is going to slowly change as you become a professional organization. So when you're paying the guys, then you'll keep them easier. But if a guy gets to a certain level and he's not been paid in South Africa, he's going to go somewhere where he will get paid for it. Basically what we're saying is we're going to change the face of sailing in South Africa if we're successful with this. And that's a huge task that lies ahead of us. We need everyone to put in a pound of flesh and try and make this thing work. If you think we're going on the wrong road, you need to say, I think you're going on the wrong road here, because this team has to work together properly. We have to make it work.